thank you all so much for joining us on a sunny Sunday. You are very welcome to this latest event for the Footsteps Book Plug. We are kicking off again with our autumn program, and it is an absolute privilege to welcome Professor Irene Tracey. She is a professor of anaesthetic neuroscience, Vice Chancellor and Warden of Merton College at the University of Oxford. Her expertise in neuroimaging and pain science is undeniable, and we are honoured to be plugging her book, Pain, the Ladybird book for adults. So Irene, we would really appreciate if you could just share with us a bit of your background and also your motivation for writing the book. And if I could ask any participants who want to ask questions to either put them in the chat, or you can pop your hand up and we'll come to you. But first, Irene, just let us know a little bit about you.
Sure, absolutely, Claire. Well, thank you, Claire, so much, and Nikki and everybody involved with the Footsteps Festival. I should say it's just a terrific forum, and I'm honoured to be invited back after the talk I gave, which was more of a research talk about again how we've been using imaging to try and understand how pain comes about both in the acute and chronic setting. So thrilled to be back to talk slightly differently, but I'm very up for any type of questions. If people have lingering questions from that talk, that's fine too, and no question is ever a bad question, so definitely feel free to ask away. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm a neuroscientist. I'm based at the University of Oxford. I've spent most of my career here. I was an undergraduate and graduate here, spent a couple of years in the States working at Harvard, then I've been back at Oxford in various different academic and leadership roles, and all the while my personal research has been focused on using advanced brain imaging tools that allow us to actually look at the human nervous system and take measurements so that we can much better understand what's going on in the context of just your everyday pain, but also importantly, most importantly, what happens in the chronic pain state, and then what we might be able to offer in terms of new things to think about, targets, new therapies to alleviate it. So that's been a sort of 25-year journey, and we're still continuing on that in terms of the research lab. It's been obviously halted over the pandemic period, so anything that was not COVID related in terms of clinical trials was paused a little bit, and so we're really thrilled that for the past few months now the labs are open and we're able to pick up where we left off and get trials back on, and some exciting new developments there. So the day job for me is as a pain scientist and running a team to again develop that and hopefully contribute to this important space. And obviously then you teach as well as an academic. You know, you have a teaching role, not always, but if you have a sort of formal university post, then that comes often with teaching, and it's quite a heavy teaching load in Oxford. So I've done various different teaching responsibilities, and the main area that I've taught is in neuroscience, but obviously also pain. So I've been actually very passionate here. My observation coming in to teach 20 odd years ago was that oddly for the medical students, there was very little pain on the curriculum, if not nothing, frankly. And that was shocking, considering that actually pain is going to be one of the most dominant things they're going to be seeing, whether at a consultant level, at a general practitioner level. And yet there was just no, thinking around, well, what should be on the syllabus in terms of pain. So I fought like mad and made sure that we got pain on, so the Oxford medical students are being sort of taught in terms of pain, and by stealth and by creep I've built it up, and I'm still doing it. So even though for the past 10 years I've not at all been obliged to teach, I still go down and do my undergraduate pain lectures, and I'm still doing that even now back running my old college, and I'll be doing it this term again. So so we have 2 to 3 lectures on that, and we also have some more colleagues now in pharmacology taking elements as well and doing the more pharmacological treatments. And then we also in the sort of neuroanatomy practical classes, we brought in some pain sort of testing to show the future physicians how difficult it was to measure pain and to understand pain, and how challenging it was as a thing to look at. So hopefully that, at the start, well, certainly I guess linking to the book, It's been part of my education piece and what I call knowledge transfer. As an academic, you're in knowledge generation, and that's your discovery science, and you're in knowledge transfer, and that's your teaching. So I've had this very direct teaching development through that lecturing, and then through tutorials and seminars. And what my observation was is that there was a real appetite, amongst the students, and they got really interested in it, and they were very excited about the science because it is really interesting and really exciting. And I hope that many of them will go on and become paying physicians and look back and be grateful. So I would like to say in parallel, there has been an awareness, I'd say globally now, and again, places like the British Pain Society, International Association for the Study of Pain, have very much thought about this problem and brought more pain on the curriculum. But maybe it's something we can talk about as well as to sort of what more should be done there. So having sort of written and been part of an editorial team to bring out the last edition for the big, huge textbook of pain. So this is this amazing book, Wall and Melzak's Textbook of Pain. I was involved in the last edition of that as an editor. You've sort of got this extreme. You've got this thick book that's that thick, and it's a door wedge, and it's brilliant, and it's comprehensive, and it's fantastic as a reference book. And then there's quite sort of specialist ones in between, but there's lots of pain lay books for people who are either patients or just the interested society. But they often, again, and there's some terrific ones, they sometimes will bring in pain narratives and pain stories, and those are all really good to hook it on. What was sort of missing, and almost as a primer, I felt, even for the undergraduate medical students, but also just for interested neuroscientists or people coming into my own team who just wanted to very quickly get up to speed and just have a sense of how does this thing pain hang, and just very quickly learn. There was definitely a gap I felt in that space, and really this sort of opportunity presented itself because I came across these expert books and thought, actually, although that's a lot less words than probably I would want in order to try and describe this, with the pictures, it almost opened up a different opportunity to present a book that could, just in very simple text and with hopefully a quite illustrative picture that I was really keen also people could use and scan and then use in talks and things, but also might be able to reach a younger audience. It could even reach kids who were school children who were interested in this problem, because the pictures would be quite arresting, and they might be able to portray, again, meaning more so than language. And remember, a lot of these books have been translated into other languages as well. That was part of what Penguin were wanting to do with these little mini expert books. So I sort of went to them and said, well, have you thought about doing one on pain? It's a really interesting topic. It's not just a huge clinical problem, but basically everybody experiences it, and people are fascinated by it, and they're fascinated by some of the weird and wonderful things that can happen in terms of pain experiences. And they were like, absolutely, because of course the editorial team, they've all had pain and they felt it. So they were like, this would be great. And what's interesting about these books is you're just free as an author. You're just allowed to pick the things that interest you. And there really isn't any or very strong editorial control over that content. So they allow the expert to decide, well, what are the things that you think would be interesting and to cover? And that was quite a key theme for them. They then match you up with a particular artist, and we can come back to that in a moment and how that process works. But I put the idea to them, they grabbed it. And so then the challenge was, because actually it's far harder to write something with less words than more words. Oscar Wilde famously said, I'm going to write you a long letter because I don't have time to write you a short one. It's actually really hard to write succinctly a lot of content in a few words. So that was actually a real challenge as to how to take these enormous topics like placebo or acute pain or chronic pain, and then in what were a tiny number of words, make sure that the content was accurate, that it was interesting, it was readable by, obviously adults, but could be accessible for an interested school child as well. And then the pictures could even be used even slightly younger. So that was the sort of aim. Whether I've achieved it, you are the people that will make that judgment, and we'll see how it continues to go. But the idea was that these are not books that are going to give you a comprehensive, detailed, but they'll give you a sense and a taste of not just the breadth of the topic and all the different things within it that are interesting, and then hopefully some additional curiosity to go and delve a bit deeper with other more specialist books. So that was what I tried to achieve. And to answer your question in a long-winded way, the motivation was very much born from teaching it a lot, recognizing in various lay talks that I've given that people are really interested in knowing a bit more about the science, and that there was just a missing window. And as I say, this book was something different to say some of the books that were all textbooks, because of that style that was built on that Ladybird model, that was one page of text and one picture. And that made it actually quite challenging, but meant that you could play around with it a little bit, and so gave you a little bit more sort of variety. I'm working with OUP to do one of the very short introduction on pain. There is one on pain at the moment, but it's all historical, so we're renaming it, and then I'll bring one out on pain that will cover the science, and that will be able to go into more detail than was possible with this one on each of those topics, so that there's more content. So that hopefully will come out next year.
That's very exciting. Can I just say I am totally inspired by your passion for teaching and your passion for, I suppose, bringing to life the science of pain for healthcare professionals. And I think you've identified a key problem there, Irene, in that I think there are many healthcare professionals who find it very difficult to objectify something that is inherently subjective. And, pain is whatever the person who experiences the pain says it is. And I think your book brings across that complexity, but as you say, within so few words, it illustrates some of the complex concepts and processes that are kind of going on underneath the surface. I am really keen to hear about your partnership with the artist, and how the pictures came about, because we have heard lots of different opinions on the artwork and the themes that they get across. So that would be really interesting to hear more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, the sort of the reach, the hope would be that even sort of, a lot of lawyers are very interested in understanding, in a nutshell, let me just have a sense of what are the different topics. So the hope is that, again, say people coming into my team who just might be coming in from another field, or say other healthcare professionals who just feel, well, I don't want to go too deep, but they can just have a sense of it. And I think if one can portray for politicians as well, if we really want to make impact and shift the needle, there's lots of different types of people where this might be just an easier way, because you can flip through it in an hour or two, to just, if they walk away and just think, oh, that's interesting, that's a lot more complex than I thought, so maybe we need to think differently, then I've achieved the aim. Because I think that's, without complex, that it put them off. So hopefully it was interesting, but they walked away thinking, I'm going to think quite differently now about this to how maybe when I started. And that was, absolutely essential. Now the artist thing is a really interesting thing. So you don't actually ever meet the artist, you don't directly talk, everything's done through an agent. So when it comes to sort of the completion of the book, you have I had a fantastic sort of editor who was just brilliantly, on the English and the grammar, and really tightened things up. So I was very, very grateful for that. And then there was somebody who I worked closely with all the way throughout, who was the sort of liaison between the agent for the artist and myself, and that was Ronnie Fairweather. You'll see these people acknowledged in my acknowledgements. And so what you had was this, I would send them a load of pictures of, say, PowerPoint figures and graphics that I'd used from teaching through to giving lectures, in terms of pain conferences or lay talks that I'd given, and said, okay, this is the topic for this page. I think this would be a great way to match that, but provide extra content. Because what you didn't want to do is have the pages full of diagrams and figures. The purpose was, it was a glance that you could look at and you got in an instant what it was that you were trying to portray, whether it was like emotions, or whether it was, natural products that could be, maybe some of the original pain relieving agents. So in a sort of very quick look, you could get a sense of what this topic was about, but not to be too heavy with loads of extra data and figures, because that's not what we wanted to achieve. They were very keen to use a particular artist that they'd used before. They have an array, and as you know, the Ladybird style is quite stylized with that sort of traditionally quite 1950s look. That was one option. The other option was they used that particular artist, Stephen Player, who'd done a book on consciousness, and he's quite sort of sci-fi in the style. So it's a different style to what I personally was expecting. And, if I was honest, at the start, I wasn't so sure that style I particularly was wedded to, because it was very different to what I had in my head. But as we went along, I realized actually it's quite different. And if what we're trying to do is make people think differently, it will be almost arresting. So, well, that's a slightly weird sci-fi-esque type stylized picture. that could be quite a surprise, I think, for people to see, because it's quite different to what you would normally see in other things. And I've been using them actually quite a lot in talks, to GPs and pain consultants just recently, and it's really interesting. People quite like them because they're so simple to understand, and they are quite arresting. But I can completely see why some people might just not like them, because in terms of the artistry, it is quite a Marmite look. I accept that. So the journey is I'd provide sort of, right, this is what I roughly want. And then he would do something and the agent would send it back, and then I'd get it. And then you had this convoluted backwards and forwards. And sometimes he'd come in with a completely different take, and it was really interesting. And it's like, well, okay, that's a really nice way of looking at it. Yeah, I can see what you've done there. And that's quite funky. So, one example would be the pinball machine. He's based in LA, so he's an American. He's on the West Coast. So yeah, so the pinball machine, in terms of, again, through the agents communicating, there's all these different options, and people are moving from this to that to the other. And, that sense of, which is the therapy is going to work for me. And we wanted to, in a nutshell, get the fact that there were all these different types of potential therapies that spanned, psychological, physical therapy, pharmacological, surgical. So that had to be in there. But on top of it, you wanted to present, how was it for the sort of patient journey? Did they feel that they were being buffeted from one to another and this, that, and the other? And he came up with the idea of a pinball machine. So again, a bit funky, a bit arresting. You'd think, what on earth is that about? Why on earth have you put all that on a pinball machine? But hopefully, it just, again, for different people might work, and for others, I mean, art is art. It's a subjective thing itself. So I'd be actually very interested to hear what people's thoughts were on that, whether they found it brought something extra to the text, or was a distraction, or they've used them themselves, scan them and use them in talks, if they're helpful.
We could hold some up. I think people would like that.
Yeah, the book is so visual.
Yes. Can people see this if I hold up now, or am I not on?
Yeah, we can see that. Yeah, absolutely. And you're limited to the palette of colors. So again, you have a set palette of colors that you have to work within. So again, everything there's a consistency in terms of, again, the tones and the colors throughout. So again, we spoke a little bit about what would be the colors that would portray different aspects in terms of, something that was more alarming and more a danger, as opposed to something that was more relieving and calming. So again, he's a very, very creative artist, very creative. Can't wait to meet him one day when I'm next on a plane and able to travel. I'll definitely look him up in LA. But that's the process. That's how Penguin do it.
That's really interesting, and it's that it's the artist properly bringing their own ideas to the table there. I really thought that this one, representing chronic pain, just illustrated a lot of the different symptoms that people would describe or that people would experience.
That's right. So I gave him, again, a PowerPoint that had the different ones I'd used, with a patient in the middle, and then those different types of pictures around, and then what he did. And I wanted to have it such that, again, on one figure, he was having to work really hard because he had these often quite complex PowerPoints, meaning he had to put it on one page with a limited palette. And so different versions for that one in particular came backwards and forwards. I said, I need you to have all these symptoms, and obviously then, okay, fine, we won't put the patient in the middle, we'll put a brain in the middle to make it really clear, the brain's where it all emerges from in terms of the perceptions. But I need to have definite segments that show, these different classes of symptoms and how they all connect. And he came up, okay, well, fine, I'll do it with a broken mirror, and I'll have each shard, because that will bring another layer of, again, just the suffering element, the fact that this is a shattered experience. And so again, he really got into, I think, that was what was fun, is with Ronnie, who I was working with, who was just terrific, and the agent for him, everybody is really interested in pain. That's what's good. If we can just get the messages out there, people really seem to engage with the topic. And I think he quite enjoyed the more he learned the science from the text, because I'd given the text that he could learn, and then he could start to think about, again, well, how would I be if this was me, and how would I represent that?
Yes, and we've had a question from the audience just about who do you think, or have you received data on who has picked up this book? Because pain can be a bit of an aversive topic for many people.
You know, I haven't yet, and that's something that again, you sort of every half a year you normally would have got the sort of data on it, but because of the pandemic, the publishing houses haven't been getting their usual data because people haven't been working in these data gathering places. So at this point I don't know, so I'm hoping that before Christmas I'll have a summary, now that everything's sort of become normal from the sort of summer in terms of people getting back at work, in terms of just where has it mostly, is it mostly in your main sort of bookstores, is it Amazon, what types of people, I don't know how much data they can gather on people to know, are they getting orders from libraries, I know that they wanted to translate them in other countries as well, whether is it particularly UK or America, so I just don't have a sense of that yet, but certainly they'll be gathering all that data. And my expectation is, but I could be wrong, is that the first wave will probably be more for healthcare professionals and patients. But the hope and the target, and I hope that that's helpful for folks, is, again, as I say, there are all these other forms where I think we've got to just get the message out. We've got to be more visible and we've got to get the messaging out. And I think sometimes, the odd documentary has been great. And again, there's been lots of things on TV, that's fantastic. But if somebody wants to really get up to speed on, again, just the breadth of pain and how it touches all these amazing different areas and the complexity of it and the enormity of the suffering of it, there are, again, as I say, I think, in terms of policymakers, politicians, I think, other areas where the money flows and can help support it for patients, these are people that we need to keep trying to communicate. And my hope is that, something like this, can help as well there.
I think it's a really wonderful opportunity to get the message out there. From your story, Irene, it sounds like the way you got the message, for Penguin and to get the book published, though, is by knocking on the door yourself.
Yeah.
From speaking to you, I don't believe you have a huge amount of spare time to be knocking on doors and asking people if they would like your, if they would like your product. So it just, I suppose it sounds, it's so inspiring that you have pushed yourself to do that. But at the same time, what can people do in terms of scientists, advocates, clinicians? What can we all do to help push on those doors and knock on those doors and say that this is something that's worth putting energy and funding behind?
Yeah, no, it's a really great question. I mean, obviously we've had the Chronic Pain Coalition in the UK, and they've done a terrific job in flagging pain and championing it and pushing it. I think there's not one solution. I mean, I'm a big believer in, you've got to take a complex thing that you want to really shift the needle on. You've got to attack at a very intersectional level. So it's got to be at multiple different levels. You've got to sort of recognize that until it becomes at the forefront of people's awareness, and it's very visible, you're not going to really shift things as quickly as you might like to. And I think compared to other medical health problems, which have had terrific lobbyists, when I worked in the States, it was just at the start of the HIV pandemic, and it was extraordinary, the differential in funding between HIV funding and, say, cardiovascular medicine. And there was almost like, I can't remember the ratio, but it was a huge difference in dollar per death for that condition versus the other. And it was because of the very effective lobbying at that point. So don't underestimate lobbying, don't underestimate talking to your local MP, raising this as an issue. I think, sadly, the opioid epidemic in America has very much raised the issue of chronic pain and the sheer volume of people suffering it and the lack of adequate therapies to treat. That, despite how tragic that is, has absolutely raised the political awareness. And of course, direct changes in terms of NIH funding with the HEAL initiative, which is this, initiative that's putting, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into research to fast track our understanding and our development of new therapies. So, you know, I think there's a shift. It feels different the past couple of years, I would say, because I think there is that awareness now coming. What we mustn't do is just sort of give an impression that it's off the radar now and it's fixed. We've got to keep it up there. And we've all got to be part of that in all the different ways that we can influence that, because we've got to keep the visibility there and we've got to keep the awareness there, so that this is, you know, absolutely up there, you know, so that when people think of cancer and they think of dementia and they think of cardiovascular disease, they should be thinking of pain. You know, it should absolutely be up there as one of those big, I mean, pharma have it, right, as one of the big 5 areas that they always work on. So they know how important it is, because it's always up there with their cancer and their dementia or neurodegeneration more broadly, and cardiovascular disease, etc. But we don't have that yet in society. So that's just about, again, people have got to learn, and we've just got to keep spreading the word at every one of these levels. And I think, you know, the teaching, I'm saying, you know, there's still work to be done, I would say, in all the sort of allied healthcare professional and medical training, in terms of, again, the syllabus and making sure that there's sufficient pain education on there. Because if you aren't training up your next generation of clinicians and healthcare professionals to know about pain and to have learned about it and to recognize its importance, you know, they're playing catch up then, you know, later on. So again, that's another area I think that we still work to be done, but certainly is much better than when I started 20 years ago.
A little bit of hope there. Yeah, no, that's really good advice. We have Layla has actually got some, she's able to do a screen share of some of the images, which I think would be really helpful, because we've been.
Is that okay, Irene, if I share just
absolutely.
a few?
Hi Layla, yeah, lovely to have you
Hi.
join. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I can talk through if you want sort of what the purpose of this was. So this one's just to symbolize the sort of immediacy of acute pain and how you attend to it when it's first happened. So the person who's just chopped and cut their finger. So this is very much acute pain. So what we wanted to do there was to show that in the immediate process of happening, the very first things you do is you locate where it's happened. So you attend to that. You immediately recognize it as a mechanical and you grade how intense it is, and then you go and do something about it. So it drives behavior. So there's lots of the back brain picture. So the idea was at that point, lots of brain activity, it's alarm bell. So that's the alarm system going off to say, oh, I've hurt myself, better go to the hot tap. And then a bit later, when you finish that and you put the thing on, it's still throbbing, it's still hurting. This is not chronic pain, this is still acute pain, but it's still going on. So the brain's now calmed down, but it's still, so the second picture of the brain at the back is still encoding, oh, it's there, it's a bit throbbing, yeah, I better look after it, make sure I don't sort of aggravate it. So what we were trying to do in that one picture was, again, that content that was being described on the page is show that, alarm bells, lots of brain activity, these immediate things that you do, sensory discrimination, intensity judgments, drives motivation, decisions to deal with it. And then later on, you've still got that sort of after pain that eventually will ease, and that's mirrored by, again, a calming down of the brain patterns. So that was what we were trying to achieve on that one. I don't know if you want to move to another one, or somebody has a hand up, I think.
There's a hand up, yes.
Yeah, happy to.
Do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yes. Hello, good evening. Thank you, Tracy, for Irene, for this lovely talk. I was wondering regarding the book, and how it is received by people that are suffering from chronic pain. Are you intending to then, at some point through your studies or whatever, have people read the book and see whether they actually understand the way you intend it to be understood, and maybe do a second version of that, or because I guess it can be quite a process as well to involve the people that you actually want to target, and to know whether they received it the way you would like them to.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And normally for other types of things we do, we're more and more because we never, so the patient participation in terms of thinking about what's important for the patient and what's the research we should be doing. This is something that, again, is thankfully now part of our culture in research. And that wasn't the case 10, 15 years ago. As scientists, you did things that you were interested in, you hoped that it had benefit, but you didn't have that engagement. Whereas we do with the research very much, and we have ways that we can formally involve patients, the ways that guides our grants and our applications and our thinking, and then our assessment afterwards. With things like this, that's sort of more for a broader audience, frankly, we don't really have those ways of having the metrics or surveys to go out there, because I don't even know who's bought the books. I can't get that information. So it would be very difficult, I think, for me to go to people and find out, because I wouldn't have the list of who they are, what was their learning, was this helpful, were there things that they were hoping would be in the book that weren't covered that we should cover next time. And as I say, for this one, it wasn't targeting only chronic pain, it was trying to really do, take the whole of sort of the bits of, quite a lot of what's relevant under the broad umbrella of pain, both your everyday acute pain as well as chronic, and just in one go trying to just be, this is the scene setter. Now, if one was doing, say, a different type of approach where you were wanting to target something specifically to chronic pain patients, I think I would do things differently if that was a book I was, say, going to do, because I think that would then be relevant to have what we call PPR, the sort of patient participation, where they would say, these are the things that actually I really don't get. I would love to know more about. I think if I read it, it might change the way I feel about things with it. And you could then put in some sort of metrics to find out whether, that was the case. So I think it's a great idea.
Because I believe, like, as in, it could be really interesting to just use your book in that sense of, like, for a certain study as well, in terms like, okay, chronic pain patients are reading this before and after, like, how does it actually impact them, that pain indication, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah,
no, you're right, because sometimes, knowledge and just better awareness can certainly demystify things, and it can take away worries or anxieties, or it might make people more worried about certain things, because it might suddenly expose things they hadn't thought about in terms of their condition. So I think it's a great idea, and you're right. One could do a sample study and give it to a group of patients and put some metrics, and something I'll have a think about, because I like the idea of that, and I do think the sort of the written and the visual format as a tool to see how that again not just influences, but how that impacts the particular patient is very important for us to learn. And again, one can think about that in more targeted. As I said, I think in the research we're doing that much better now than we have done before, but we're not necessarily doing it in all. If I give talks and things, we often get evaluations, but the evaluation is a range of sort of fairly basic questions around, did you, was it useful? Did it find content? It's not really probing for a patient, how did this change the way you're thinking about your condition? So yeah, so I might have to come back to Attila, if that's your first name, in the thinking.
Yes, that's my
it's
name.
a really good thought. It's a really good thought.
Yeah, I'll send you out an email to follow up on it. Thank
Great.
you.
So what's this picture we're looking at now?
Yeah, so this one is probably the one that's the most, we went back and forward quite a lot. So what we wanted to signify here is, again, I had one page basically, because I wanted to cover migraine and headaches, even though I'm doing a tiny bit of work on that, but it's not traditionally. As pain scientists, we tend to have people who work in migraine and headache, then we have people who work in other types of chronic pain conditions, your musculoskeletal, your neuropathic, and your functional. And although those two worlds are now thankfully coming more together, and we're recognizing that there's quite a lot of similarity in the mechanisms between the two, they are two quite separate worlds. So I was toing and froing as to whether I should even go down the whole migraine headache one, but I thought I can't write a book on pain that's trying to cover and give samples of everything and not mention, again, trying to speak to the everyday person who has pain experiences like cutting their finger. A lot of people have hangovers, or they have experiences where they've got a throbbing head the next morning, and then you've got obviously people with migraine. So in one page we were trying to symbolize a migraine patient, and then a person who's got a hangover, and try and explain the more acute sort of pain of what's going on with potentially a hangover versus what's going on with a migraine. Of which both, well, migraine we're knowing a lot more about now, hangover is still a work in progress. So again, it was trying to give people a sense of, you know, these two areas that are head related pain, quite different. One is, you know, one is induced yourself and is temporary, and one is again episodic and very, you know, incredibly impactful. And then just trying to sort of, yeah, again give people a visual picture of that one. So that was the purpose of that one. You'll see, you probably can't, well, it's very difficult to see. You see the girl who's got the hangover and she's leaning on a table there. And we did have quite complex pictures where we were trying to draw the mechanism for migraine as a sketch, but it just became too busy. So again, that's I think you know, it's a good illustration of where you know, you decided to go with just the main picture rather than try and put too much content in, because no matter what we ended up sketching on that table, it wasn't going to be enough content to be useful. But you can just see a few little squiggles there, which is to symbolize, again, you know, some of the vessels and the nerves around the skull and the trigeminal nerve. That's what we were trying to pick out there. But and that one we've seen before. So that was, you know, again, wanting to, you know, again, put the patient in the middle. You know, obviously they're in a state of suffering, and there were all these different types of options available that span, you know, which again is, you know, so interesting, I think. And again, for people who haven't thought about pain at all, really drives home the complexity that, you know, compared to other conditions that don't have this array of, you know, deep invasive surgical options and joint replacements, through to, you know, the mainstay pharmacological, through to, again, alternative medicine opportunities, through to talking therapies and cognitive behavioral therapies, physical therapy. So all those different elements in there, I think, again, trying to sort of just drive home this message that, you know, this is a complex problem and you need this suite of interventions to help unpick all these mechanisms that increasingly we recognize has gone wrong. And this idea that, you know, it's not clear yet which one you would start with or necessarily put in, or what combinations of them for each patient. So that journey for the patient is, you know, still to be determined. And it would be great, you know, if we had again, clarity around how to measure a person's, you know, particular pain state, and then on an individual level say, okay, this and this and this is going to be the right combo to give you as best relief as possible. And I don't need to tell you that that's not what currently we have. So this idea of being buffeted around a little bit with the pinball, which was quite Americanized. I mean, I know we didn't play pinball in Britain, but, you know, I let it go because, you know, I thought, well, these Americans, I'll let them have one in that's Americanized.
I actually love this one. Like you said, it really sort of denotes the frenetic bouncing around and also the sort of distress of it all as well. Yeah. So I think this is one of my favorites of the illustrations. So I don't know if we got any more, or is there's another one.
Yeah, this one I really like. So this one sort of lifted, you know, quite close to sort of how I've used a picture like this in my talk. So what we're symbolizing here is again a visual of the placebo effect, very much going back to Beecher, who in 1950s did these trials in, again, soldiers in the war. So you've got a classic scene there of a sort of, you know, 1940s 50s theme, and the yellow in the syringes matching the yellow in the vials that the old then historical monks who were singing the placebo chants, these Latin chants that are called placebos. And these monks, as you know, well, you might not know, but they were paid to come to your funeral. So they were fake mourners. They weren't really sad you were dead at all. So that's why placebo has this connotation of fakery and deception, where the text tells you it's a real physiological manipulation and we know it really well and it's very powerful. So that's why you have these genuine effects, because it produces these expectation changes in your brain, which can drive these endogenous, these built-in systems to release and inbuilt opioids, and that can help sort of block the pain. So what we were trying to symbolize there was a little bit of the history of the monks and the placebo chants, walking in the background of vials of yellow, and then the yellow in the syringe of the nurse in this classic 50s experiment of Beecher. So it's a sort of ode to history, that one, but with the science still there. Yeah. I quite like this one. I think it's quite cool.
That was the last one. I really like the way that you acknowledged other researchers that had come before you, Irene, in the book as well, and the kind of history of pain science. I found that really great in the book as well.
Thank you, Layla. Yeah, no, it's again, there were so many names, you know, I had to miss out. So I just sort of highlighted in each area as best I could who were just some of the real landmark figures, both from the neuroscience but also the pain science perspective, that really gave us a sort of step change in our thinking about whether that's at the very molecular level, you know, through to again more ethereal things like placebo effects. So, and you know, hopefully that just gives people names to, you know, go up and look up and read a little bit more about.
Yes, it's great that you've given people and signposted them to other wonderful texts. It really illustrates that this is a journey. It's not about reading one book and then that being complete. So that was a great thing about the book. There's a comment from Tim about his struggles trying to explain to his children who were interested in his experience of pain. And Tim is actually going to come on and talk about his memoir as on the book plug in the coming months. So we really look forward to that. But he said that he really appreciated your book as a way of describing to his teenagers on their terms what's actually going on. And he also said that the brevity was really impressive.
I appreciate that because you know, I'm a real chatterbox, so I love chatting. And as anybody who knows, who tries to keep me to time on a lecture, I'm an absolute nightmare. So, and although I sort of can write quite succinctly, this is the hardest thing I've actually written, because you know, I was keen that it had facts and content. But you know, it's tough because these are complex things you're trying to explain, and you just don't have many words to do it in. So so I thank you very much, Tim. I appreciate that because I worked hard on that.
And I, as a person who lives with pain, I think out of the book, the bit that struck me the most was on page 42, where you say, as a society, we are perhaps more comfortable with a nociceptive driven model of pain. We prefer to see the origin of pain in blood, guts, and gore. But this type of pain is not more important than emotional or psychogenic pain. Pain is pain, no matter the source. Its very definition allows for multiple origins. That was so important to me, and I think to other people. So I just want to thank you for it as much as anything.
Yeah, well, I've said, you know, that sentiment I've tried to say many times in more my scientific articles, and particularly reviews. In a review, you can get more on your soapbox, and you know, well, you can get on your soapbox and you can say things that you can't say in a research paper where you've got to really just stick with the facts, but there you can give more opinions. And this issue about sort of, you know, class A pain and class B pain, I mean, we're really stuck with that, and it's just wrong. I mean, it's just scientifically flawed. It's coming. I think it is coming. You know, there's, you know, again, more nuanced understanding, I would say, and I've even observed this, you know, in the legal profession, in the context of other countries, you know, thoughts around, you know, what if you don't know the origin of, again, an influence on a perception and a subjective state, you have to just be open and allow yourself that the very sort of medical structural model that we are, of course, all built on is not good enough, and it's certainly not accurate and complete. So it's coming, but I think I just felt that I was really keen to keep that sentences in. So I'm glad you picked up on that, because it's something I feel very passionate about, and I think we can't say it frankly enough, because we just have to keep reminding people that, you know, I don't care what produced that network of brain activity. Well, I do care, but it doesn't matter to me what's produced that network of brain activity. It's the network of brain activity that's given that patient an experience of pain. Now, it's our job to find out what's produced it. It might be because something coming in from a joint or an injured nerve. It might be completely different. So our job is to find that out, not to make a judgment call about whether that's, you know, real pain or not. So I think we just have to keep saying that, and again, keep, you know, I do a lot of educational things. I don't do any expert witness stuff because I'm not clinical. I'm a basic scientist, but I get asked to do a lot, but I refuse to. But what I do is educational talks, again, for lawyers and people who are working in these areas, because I think, again, it's really important for them to learn the complexity so that they better serve patients in terms of disability access and other things. And they know it's more complex than what they're often told, when a very simple x-ray is just showing whether a bone's broken or not. I mean, obviously it's better than that, but, you know, my point is, again, it's an example of where other areas of society who are dealing with pain outside of the healthcare professional grouping need to continuously be, you know, updated as to what the science is saying and how you should think about it, because we're always changing our framework of thinking, and that's a very important shift, I think, for pain. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you so much. It's certainly something that we need in the political world a bit more.
Yeah.
I think we're all struggled with getting politics to be more interested and engaged in pain in all its myriad forms. But yeah,
are there obvious areas missing? I'd be interested to hear from the audience whether there were particular topics that you hoped would be in there, and that weren't, because obviously, you know, I couldn't cover everything, so I'd be keen to hear what was sort of missing.
What do people think?
I'm just scrolling through some of the questions to see.
I was just a tiny bit sad that there was no physiotherapy in the pinball picture.
I'm sorry about that. It is mentioned there, but it's in the text, but they couldn't get it on the pinball. It is, that's the probably the one you're referring to, Layla. So it is in the text, don't forget. But yeah, maybe I couldn't give one. I mean, the only one I gave a whole dedicated was the sort of Nature's Pharmacopoeia, so that had a page with the picture. But my next one, the VSI, I can go into things a bit more, and I'll be coming to you, Layla, for some advice as to how to best write that. It's, you know, as a researcher, it is the one area that personally I've less sort of come into contact with in terms of looking at the research impact of, again, physical therapy interventions and stratifying, and that's, you know, that's just partly, again, drawing from where I am in my evolution. I know that we're hoping to do more together. So I think that there are some, you know, new avenues that we can pursue, and actually also opportunities to explain to people, because I think not just for pain, but I just think the sort of physical health element and physical therapy, and again, you know, recognition of changes, you know, in terms of your biomechanics with not just pain conditions but other conditions is so important. And again, I think it's a vacuum that people aren't recognizing, you know, our children's lack of, you know, physical activity with, you know, less at school, and our very, you know, we sit in chairs. I mean, my goodness, what has COVID done to just our health, because we've been sat for hours and hours in front of Zoom. I mean, I can't imagine what was going to come through your doors, you know, in terms of, again, postural problems and things. So there's lots of areas where, again, it's important, is really key, but maybe hasn't penetrated yet a more lay understanding of that. From a physical therapy perspective, you know, from somebody like yourself, people talk about it as, you know, physical health for cardiovascular benefits and etc. Right? You get a lot of that, and it's starting to come a little bit for brain health, and people recognizing that it's good for brain health and well-being. But I think there's more, because, you know, yeah, our biomechanics is falling to pieces, isn't it?
Well, also what it does to your immune response, and in terms of your long-term health. There's lots of reasons why physical activity could be helpful, I think, for people living with pain. But I won't start banging on about that.
Yeah, no, but it's good, and it's good that you flagged it, because I was conscious. I mean, I got it in there, but it just didn't make it in the picture. I'm not sure how I'd do it, actually. How would you recommend one would do the sort of
don't know, maybe just some movement, but you know, perhaps people living with pain could give their ideas on that one.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear. Yeah, maybe put in the chat as to how one would best visualize that element of it.
Someone in the chat has just said that it's if this book improves the way the clinicians deal with chronic pain, that would be a wonderful outcome. And I think that's really, reading this book, I wondered if people would people living with pain would give it to employers or to clinicians, or you know, just to maybe say this page is this picture really sums up what I experience, or this process, it seems to be important in my condition. And that kind of speaks to Frances. I think you mentioned that you see yourself kind of sitting beside somebody living with pain and picking out individual parts of the book, and that's really where this book acts as a huge resource. I don't know if you want to speak more about that, Frances.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think it's crucial that, and I'm a clinician who's focused very much on self-management, is that when people understand and they get it, which I think this is where the book can be potentially very helpful, exactly using it in that sort of way to say, look, it's like this, can you see? Maybe read that. But actually, you're no different from other people who've got pain and whose brains are struggling. So it's helping to normalize it for them, and they're not way out of sync and really strange. And I think it's a whole art and creativity field that we need to be focusing on for the future, where clinicians engage and use such resources, but so do people with pain in helping each other.
Yeah.
So it's less of a lonely journey.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really key point. Yeah, yeah. I mean, how often are sort of, you know, in terms of, let's take the NHS, you know, what would you say is the quality of the literature and the pamphlets that are given out to patients? You know, what material do you actually have, Frances, Layla and others who are clinical, you know, to give to patients to help them understand and deal with?
I can see Nikki's having hysterics there. So
I'm thinking that's a nothing.
There's some. It's certainly not as detailed as your book. I mean, there are books like Lorimer's books, but that tends to be, in my experience, a little bit Marmite. I don't know how other people find that. We have our own materials, but they're only given to patients that are accessing our service. They're not just freely available. I don't know what Claire and Frances has written a wonderful book.
I would just say that we've been desperately trying in this area for the last 3 years to put quality information into the public domain, but also with two particular websites, one aimed at clinicians, which is called Live Well with Pain. The other one is My Live Well with Pain, which is aimed at people who are struggling with pain. And recognizing the whole issue that people have with reading. Dyslexia, I think, is part of the pain family. I see it almost as a processing issue, just like pain experience is a processing issue. And actually, when people are struggling and you work with them face to face, you realize that they're struggling with other processing, like reading, or dealing with 101 other ways of communicating in their typical day. So actually, clinicians need absolutely top-notch materials in any medium in order to communicate the fabulous understandings we have now.
Right, that's really helpful. And would you say, and I'd be interested to hear from you patients as well on the call, you know, whether they find it easier to learn if it's just taking like the fact, like I've tried to just explain it with a picture, or doing it through a journey of a particular patient and then trying to use that more as a case study and go, I mean, maybe both, I don't know. I'm just interested in what model people find most helpful, to be engaged with it, you know, to stick with the reading and to learn.
I think it depends on the person. Some people like lots of information, others like something simple or more of a story or a narrative, or don't want an explanation about pain at all.
Right.
I'm just going to bring in Anne. If you want to unmute
Yeah, okay. I think some of you know, I used to be a trainer and for adult literacy tutors. I used to go out to their classes, and one of the main things that their students were coming in for, and remember, these are people usually 18 and over, were things from the hospital, letters, pamphlets, leaflets, prescriptions. I don't know whether you're aware, but there are more 16-year-olds leaving school with really poor literacy, reading and writing skills than we have been taking off the top by the adult literacy classes. Most of the information I have seen myself as a patient has been intelligible for a wide, quite a large proportion of our population. And I think one of the problems is that most of it is written by well-educated people, people that use language and jargon that is just completely beyond the comprehension of a lot of your client group. So I'm quite happy to work with anyone if you've got anything that you want to put out there to have a look. And with I don't use a red pen, but I mean, I think that you're not going to get people to engage in something if they don't know about it. There's no point giving them a leaflet if they can't read. And I think, Francis, you're talking about dyslexia, which my children all suffer from, and it is a processing thing. But can you imagine, you know, not being able to read the instructions of how to keep yourself well or how to improve your health or anything like that? And that's what we're doing, or that's what has been done. So I really do think that it needs quite a real rethink about how you write and what you say in these pamphlets. And I think visual, you know, the artistic way maybe is using that much more than words, where people can see is a much better way of being able to reach your client group.
Yeah, so it's so interesting, Anne. And yeah, so I asked the question because I was sort of unaware sort of what literature currently, you know, is out there and being useful. I think what do you think out of these infographics? We're using them more and more to communicate things, where you've got the combination of, you know, the visual and then just a couple of, again, words, and they can be really quite, I've been quite impressed. I've not seen many for pain, but in other forms of neuroscience we're using them. And we use them all the time, even just like explain, you know, this is the University of Oxford, you know, and we've got, you know, this many people and we have a picture of people. And it's very simply, you know, you take the whole of this complex, this big university, and you could just in one cartoon really give a sense of, wow, there's all that happening.
We've known about this problem for so long. So why, when, you know, on the little things, just something easy, you know, like on the, when you get your prescription or whatever. So why haven't we got like, I don't know, a little clock or something like that, where it's a visual description of when you have to take your tablets and how many? because that creates a problem with people not taking them or overtaking them. So then you give them a sheet of paper of little tiny writing. Take a view that lots and lots of people, whether they have dyslexia or not, cannot, you know, like reading black on white is very complex. And so how many leaflets are being dished out with black on white? It's just, you know, small things like that. And as I say, it is language, and I feel really passionate about it because I saw many people not taking medication, in fact, skipping hospital appointments because they were embarrassed because the consultant or another clinician would be using language that they didn't understand. So I think it's quite a, you know, it's something I think we need to be all trying to help.
Yeah, no, it's really great. Yeah, Francis has put this link to the Live Well diagram with one for sleep. That's just exactly the sort of thing, Francis, I was wondering. They look really good. Those are really yeah, no, and it's obviously a big area that needs to be tackled, I'd say. This is a really interesting, you know.
Yes, someone's just put poor font. Absolutely. Why? Yeah. You know, if you've got a problem reading, having a flowery font does no good at all.
No.
And people that have a lot of eyesight or reading problems, the letters dance, don't they?
Yeah.
They're not flat on the page. They dance. So, you know, I think that the thing about the book is that it's got pictures. And that in itself is a step forward, because they're normal pictures. They're not scientific and they're not medical as such. So well done.
Thank you.
Brilliant, 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 brilliant.
Thank you. Yeah, but this pamphlet, this is great. Well, this is something, again, we can think about, because I guess for me, you know, one of the opportunities of connecting with you is this is such a great forum, actually, to exchange ideas and think about how to do things better. And
certainly in my clinical practice, one of the main things, just exactly what Anne spoke so beautifully to there, is asking people what format they would like it in. And if they have additional needs, it's just asking them, how can we make it easier for them to process that information? So printing things on different colored paper, or it might be that they prefer audio or visual videos and things like that. So I think the main thing over COVID is the everything became so accessible overnight. I think we have to bear in mind that we can't go back the other way and start putting restrictions on things again. I think we have to make things easy. I was even just thinking when Anne was mentioning about the prescription, you know, even a simple QR code getting printed with instructions would allow people to access things through their smartphone, or audio files could tell them how to take their medication. And it's these technological approaches that have not translated to the NHS, but are basic in the restaurant industry or in other industries. So I think it's something that we should kind of all be mindful of. And also I recognize, you know, there'll be patients here who have an understanding and have a voice that could maybe speak to clinicians that they have a relationship with, to put it to the forefront of other clinicians' minds. It's not just about those who already have the power. I think we all have more influence than we recognize with these things.
Yeah.
But I'll definitely be getting in touch around I'll be getting in touch with Anne about her offer of service there. That's wonderful.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
So and yes, in terms of Layla's comment there, I'm aware in Scotland the reading age for health is 7, and Layla's saying that it's legislation in the NHS in England for it must be an 8-year-old, and that they use software to check that. So things are progressing, but I am well aware that certain trusts and health boards will be further ahead than others.
Yeah.
So it's really important. Irene, I appreciate that we've ran over time.
Oh, it's not a problem at all. No, this is so interesting because it's you know, communication, I guess, is sort of what it's all about, isn't it? And it's just, you know, how can we harness, as you say, some of the advances in the more tech side, and that's both in monitoring. You know, I just think again there's so many opportunities to monitor patients better using the tech, as well as obviously communicate. So I think it sounds like we need to follow up, all of us, with some collaborative thinking around, again, how we can maybe take others forward. This is great.
Yeah, absolutely. I thank you so much for such a fascinating discussion. I am sure there'll be a lot of interest in purchasing the Ladybird book on pain, and I really think that it's important to put this in the hands of people who maybe haven't experienced long-term pain, or kind of the more challenging pain conditions, to give them a better understanding. So thank you so much for putting in the work and knocking on the doors and getting this book published.
No worries, absolute pleasure. And again, if there's other things that that collectively we can do. I know I spoke when I gave the lecture last time about a journal club. That's another thing that again we can think about doing, where we can take some of the scientific papers and again help explain them in different ways. And I'm really keen to think about how we can do that, because communication is key, and better ways that we can, as you say, reach out and make sure that we get pain right up there visible, so that we can really help. That's the challenge for us all.
Absolutely.
Thank you all for coming. I appreciate you all spending a Sunday evening on this. This is very kind of you. So lovely to have everybody here. And thank you again, Nikki and Claire, for arranging it.
Thank you so much, Irene. It's been as fascinating as ever. And yes, we'll definitely get in touch with the journal stuff. Hopefully there'll be some time spare soon to crack on with it. Everybody's so busy.
Yeah, no, I know, but we should make the time. Yeah,
definitely.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, take care. Enjoy your evenings, everyone. Look after yourselves.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye, Layla.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.